either you sit there and accept your fate that this is what's happening to you, this is me now, this is my situation, or keep doing something. Keep meeting up with people, keep going out to things, keep doing the things that you love, and something will eventually come to you because you're truly working on yourself for yourself. So it's either you sit there and accept this is my life or you do something about it.
Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to Us to Joy podcast, a podcast where we aim to build a better mindset for better relationships.
This week on Bit of Mindset, bit of better relationship with ourselves when we're embarking on new journeys, growth, and all that good stuff. We're talking about feeling lonely during our times in growing ourselves, self-improving, and those times in our lives.
Yes, loneliness is a part of growth, which we may not notice as we're so focused on ourselves and making those changes and facing those things in our life.
What I wouldn't say is that. I would say it's more so sometimes when you're embarking on a new journey, you might wonder, why do I feel down? Why do I feel sad? And then you might realize that you feel a bit lonely, but you're not sure why. So today we are going to tackle these areas and we're going to show some of our personal stories on times that we have felt a bit lonely during growth. So let's get into it.
So I guess the first question for both of us is, have we actually felt those moments where we are lonely?
Yeah, I definitely have. And just linking it back to loneliness specifically during growth, I definitely have. And I think I've done it. I've been in that situation from very early on. I'll share some personal stories later on, but yeah, quick answer, yes. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely have in my journey of life.
And also, loneliness is actually a universal human experience. I don't think there's been ever a time where anyone has said that they don't feel lonely. There's just times where you don't feel like you relate or you feel like you fit in, whether it's throughout a job or maybe changing friend groups or just being somewhere new. Like, there are times where you would feel lonely. So it's quite a common thing. Actually, I wanted to explain why we feel loneliness during growth. This isn't my explanation, but I saw a reel, I think on Instagram it was, or it could be one of those social things. And it was a really inspirational guy who was talking about how people generally feel lonely. The way that he broke it down was really interesting. He said, because you've outgrown your old group, whether that's friends, career, but you're trying to move into a new area of life. Say you're moving up in career, you want to realign to different people now because you've outgrown your old friendship group. But the reason why you feel lonely is because you haven't aligned yourself to the new group. Like, maybe in career wise, those people have higher professions, they've done that for many years, but you're still trying to move into that. So they can't relate to you yet and you can't relate to them. But then your old group can't relate to you. So you're kind of stuck in this middle ground. So I thought the way that he explained that was quite helpful in terms of understanding why you may feel lonely during growth.
Well, I think we need to define what loneliness actually means. Loneliness is that negative feeling that arises when our social needs are unmet by the quantity and quality of our current social relationships.
Yeah, so I think that definition is quite helpful. This is only a definition of lonely itself, but that definition really ties in well with this whole topic of like why you feel lonely during growth, because it was saying how your social needs are unmet. And that really does tie back into what we've been saying, where you're moving out of old circles, you're moving into new circles, and they're not meeting your needs at this current point in time.
Yeah, so I actually have a story where, from my own personal experience, that I felt loneliness. To start with, it's really during my earlier ages. And I may have spoken about this in a previous episode where during my upbringing and middle school to high school life, I definitely had an issue finding my own identity. And that period of time was just me trying to figure out what kind of person I was. That subconscious, like indirect comparison that I had or that I experienced within that family culture, family friends, really made me question myself as to, should I be more like, for an example, a person that is more studious, a person that's more physical, taking more sports, getting certain types of grades and things like that. So I felt that I was extremely lonely because no one else around me seemed to be essentially going through the same thing. So I found myself changing from different group circles to try to figure out whether or not I was that type of person. I was always moving around from group to group.
So when you say you felt lonely during that time when you're trying to figure yourself out, why did you feel like no one else was going through the same thing? Like, is that your own feelings that you just gathered, or is that something that you actually voiced and then you other people like, oh nah, I can't relate to that?
That's actually a good question. And I also feel that because I was pretty much the only Asian kid within my cohort, you could say that I couldn't really relate to a lot of people.
Mm.
That's why I felt lonely because there wasn't any other Asians that could experience the same cultural experience that I had. So, yeah, maybe I could have asked my friends at the time, but they would have just looked at me and been like, you're an idiot because they wouldn't have experienced that comparisons, that indirect, I wouldn't call it as a downplay of talk, but being compared with different family friends and whatnot, they wouldn't have understood where I was coming from.
Trying to dig deeper. Why do you feel like they wouldn't be able to relate unless you voiced it and they said something? So do you think it could be something that you could have just voiced to them and maybe they could understand from their point of view?
Potentially, but I also felt that I couldn't voice it for
Like you
whatever
didn't
reason at the
feel
time.
safe to voice it
Of
to
course,
them.
yeah, I wasn't confident enough to voice it. I just, yeah, wasn't in a safe area because it's all unknown, right? So the transition or trying to figure out myself was just an unclear pathway for me.
Mm. Yeah, well, like mine wasn't really friendships. I have something quite similar. This one, I was gonna say, I don't know if when I tell this story, if it sounds like a period of growth, but it's definitely when I was growing up. All these stories, if you're an OG listener, you know that me growing up and having a divorced family and having to grow, literally grow from a young child, young baby to like where I am now, it always felt lonely to me because essentially, even though I have many siblings and I grew up with other siblings, I'm technically the only child in the immediate family where I have divorced parents and I am the only one in that family. So my siblings that had each other, and if I just felt like personally from growing up, like really young age, I didn't have anyone I could share these stories with where like, oh, if I want to see my mom or if I want to like do something with my dad or like those things and to voice and talk about things I'm thinking internally. It's not on them, but it's more like I just never felt like I could voice it where people could understand me. So I can see from your point where you're talking about how you couldn't voice your thoughts and your opinions to other people in your school. That was the same with me, with my family.
And so, would you say that you just had no confidence, or what? It was just like, why couldn't you voice?
It's a mixture of everything. Family, where they're like, oh, you can't cry, you can't show vulnerability, you have to be strong for yourself. And voicing your thoughts and your opinions and feelings in an Asian culture is not common. So that was already a big barrier. And growing up, like this is, I'm talking about my parents broke up since 1 years old. So I've never had parents like living together. So to go through that, whereas like my siblings who had parents who were living together, it's quite different. And I think as a kid, you kind of picking up cues where you're like, oh, are they living the same lifestyle as you? And then you realize it's not. So you don't know if you can voice that. And like, if you bring it up, what will happen? If you talk about it, what will happen? And I think this, I guess, a fear or like a no go zone kind of blocked me from talking about these things. And because I can't share with anyone, I felt lonely.
Do you think if you actually voiced and shared to your siblings, do you think it would have been a different result?
Yeah, like definitely. I think as a kid, I just was too afraid to voice my opinions because of the upbringing. Like, you're just not allowed to talk about your thoughts. But now, in hindsight, even though they have a different family background in terms of talking about the divorced parents side of things, I feel like I should have talked to them and I definitely could have because, like, we have a great relationship. It's like not like the Cinderella stories where like your step sisters and all of that are evil. Like we had a great relationship. So I think regardless of your situation, and because the situation isn't apples to apple, I still could have talked to them because in the end they are still family and sharing that I think would have even brought us closer because they have a better understanding of my side of things.
I can see where it's similar to my story, but I guess the difference is my like the friends or the people that I was surrounding myself were just unknown.
Yeah. And like I just always felt like an outcast, I guess. And I think the learning from this is a lot of this is self-inflicted because it's all these thoughts that I thought to myself. It's like I can't voice myself. I can't talk to people because they can't relate. But if you think about it from a third person's point of view, all I really had to do was share my thoughts, share my own feelings. But I guess it's hard. You're a kid. You don't know what you can do, what you can't do, and with the upbringing, of not sharing your thoughts and feelings that did have a massive effect.
I guess yeah, when you're a kid, even for my example, you're so young, you're just not you don't have that experience to life, so I guess you just don't know how to handle those situations.
Mm. But from that though, it did definitely bring me to who I am today. I would say if that I didn't go through these where I had to sit alone, stew in my own thoughts, stew in my own feelings and emotions, I wouldn't be this person where I can actually sit here and break apart my thoughts and be like, is this really a thought or is this something that I can actually take on board and do something about it and understand my own emotions? Like I have a really good sense of self and really in tune with everything that I feel and think. So there are stuff that I grew out of it too. A quick interruption. We want to thank all of you who have been supporting us. And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube.
If you found any of our episodes helpful, please share to your friends and family as it would help us grow.
Now back to the episode.
Yeah. But talking about self-inflicting thoughts, similar to my second experience, now that I'm thinking about it. And that was just during my post high school going into the uni stages of trying to figure out what should I be studying, because during high school and even within family, it was very much like as soon as you finish high school, you should go straight to study because that would give you the correct pathway for career growth and just life in general. So just like being everyone else is just very much going straight into uni. That was the biggest transition for me because obviously coming out of high school, it was very much set times, set schedules, going into full adult life where you control that yourself. So trying to figure out what to study and what I would like to study essentially, that was a massive struggle because I just didn't know myself. I didn't know what I truly enjoyed. And there was a big part in that where I did feel lonely because I didn't know who to ask. And where I said it relates to that self-inflicting thought, it's very much like, oh, I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I had to try and figure it out myself because that was my own journey.
But why did you feel that though? Like just bringing yourself back to that time. Why did you feel like you couldn't voice to anyone? Did you feel like you had to do this journey yourself and figure it out yourself, so you didn't want to ask?
Yeah, partially. At the same time, like you see all your friends from high school transition into their life and they're doing their own thing and they don't seem like they're really struggling. So you're
Mm.
thinking, oh shit, okay, it must be something that's just me. So you try to embark in this journey by yourself and you try to tackle it alone without really thinking, oh, there might have been other people that I could have asked.
Such an interesting perspective because I'm just thinking and bringing myself back to transitioning from high school to uni. And first of all, I didn't actually get into uni after high school because my OP score, which is what we were scored against back in the days in Australia or in Queensland, I just missed it by 1 mark. So I had to actually go into TAFE. And I'm just trying to put myself in your same shoes. I didn't actually feel lonely at that time because I actually felt like I had a lot of friends. And because I had friends at that time, even though it wasn't friends in terms of sharing the same journey, going to uni, going to TAFE and all that, I think because I had so many people around me just as friends, I felt like fulfilled, I guess, in that way. So as long as I get to hang out with friends and just do the things I want to outside of uni and studying, I was satisfied at that point in time.
Yeah, it's a little different for me because when I actually went into uni, I had to go to a uni that was quite far. So I had to catch 3 or 4 buses just to get there. And it take me 2 or 3 hours to get to uni.
Yeah, and that was when you caught up with me at Garden
Yeah,
City.
relax, mate, relax. All right.
And then you disappeared.
Yeah. So I was alone. Like, none of my friends went to the same uni as me.
Like
So
physically alone. I was also alone. Like I went to a TAFE where, well, I guess I had one guy that I knew there who also studied the same course, but I was the only one that went to TAFE. Everyone else went straight to uni. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand your thought process during the time to see why you felt lonely.
yeah, I definitely wasn't a confident kid back then, and I always was afraid to be by myself. So that's why I maybe just didn't have the confidence to talk to people or anything like that. It was only really when I got out of that university, got some scores and transitioned to something that was more local. That's where I actually really built my friendship group from there.
Yeah, I would like to dig in on in terms of that though, because that's the growth. Like you transition from not being confident to being confident after uni, and this is actually what we're talking about in this topic. So, what did you do to push yourself through from not being confident to being confident after uni, so you're not lonely anymore?
I feel the biggest thing that I realized coming out of high school was I wasn't social. I was very, I was kind of like a hermit. I always was at home. But the thing was, I'm a bit of a strange one because when I was in high school, I used to like going outside. I used to skate, I used to BMX, I used to hang out with like some kids in along my street. So yeah, I could socialize and stuff like that. But the biggest thing, especially during high school, was I needed to get out, I needed to work, I needed to really soak in that adulthood. And that was my challenge.
Do you think it was the environmental change that affected your confidence? Because let's say you, when you were in high school, you went out to ride on bikes, go around your street, like that's the comfort of your home. But now going to uni, it's a whole different space. Like you probably haven't gone to the city as often, you haven't gone to this venue or this location, the uni destination as often. So it's like a new space and environment for you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it would definitely be the combination of that, doing things alone, going traveling more. So traveling and figuring out those things alone was such a big slap in the face for me.
Interesting. Yeah, so another one similar to you just moving into the adult world, so design journey, which is my career where I work. That's also been one area where I feel lonely the most, but I wouldn't actually say that this is lonely where I actually felt sad or I don't know how you describe it, like down about it. It's just that I definitely am lonely in terms of I'm just doing everything myself because in terms of my friend circle, no one else is a creative and no one else is a designer. So I physically am embarking this journey by myself and I can't really ever share or talk about my journey in the career because it's quite hard to understand sometimes for people who aren't in the industry and to explain it to someone you have to break it down the process of what it's like in this work industry is very different and also straight after studying design I was going to freelance and I still freelance at the moment but it's just a freelance journey which is essentially like you're doing a business or you're embarking in a business journey. Not a lot of my friends, or I don't think any of my friends are into that side of things, like starting their own business, running their own job. They're quite comfortable in doing, like working for someone, doing the 9 to 5, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just like the values and what their work career goals are very different. So sometimes to share that side of things can be quite different and still, again, feels like it's no one can relate to me when I'm talking about my struggles or when I'm talking about what I'm trying to do. Like, for example, I had to work so late. Their first answer is like, oh, why do you work so much? Or why do you work so late? And nothing wrong by saying that. That is a good question. But for someone who is embarking early on in a freelance or a business journey, sometimes you do have to work those extra hours and you want someone to push you further to be like, oh, you're almost there, like this, or like you're doing good, or something like that is probably something that you want to hear that pushes you to keep you going rather than being, why are you working so much or why are you working so late? And that sometimes can demotivate you because you're like, oh, maybe I am working too much, maybe I'm working too late. Like, I know that there is some good that comes out of it. Could be concerns that I'm working actually too much, but that's like some of the parts where people who aren't in that industry can't relate to.
Yeah, I think it's just that default question of why you're working so much when you say you don't have time or you're tired. That is expected from most people anyway. But
Yeah. So it's just I felt lonely in that way because sometimes you talk to people about your problems and it's not like you really need a solution sometimes. You just want someone to listen to you. But if like someone asks you why you're working so much, sometimes that can be quite offensive to someone who's actually trying to really push themselves to do more or like push themselves to build up a business or a freelance. It's it's hard. It's a hard one, and it's like you can't really blame anyone because they don't know any better either. So
or they're just not exposed to that type of environment. So they're not used to really motivating people or motivating their peers by words.
yeah, I'm relating this back to that reel that I said about the motivational guy, which I really hope I can find his name, but I can't. Is this really is that I've outgrown the old circle because they can't relate to me and I can't really share all my thoughts. I can share sparingly and be like, yeah, they can listen to me, but I have no new group to move into because I don't have any different design friends. I don't have anyone I can go to as a mentor and be like, hey, I feel like this, or I'm doing this and I have questions. What can I do? I had no one like that. And like that guy said, when you're trying to reach that new group and they can't relate to you either, I was like that because I had no experience. I had nothing that I can share and nothing that I can really go in and have a deep conversation with because I'm just as lost and I don't know the right questions to ask. I don't know the right things to say. And it was just like a really difficult place to be like, what do I do here? Like, who do I go to? What do I do? The only thing I can do is just trial and error until something like sticks on the wall.
That's something that I definitely do relate to, which is my next example that's about career. When you're trying to embark in that specific growth of career, but you just don't know if that's the right thing for you. I definitely did chop and change a lot in terms of my career growth or just trying a particular industry. And there were definitely moments where you try to obviously understand whether this is for you, but also try and ask for advice from others or your peers, whether or not maybe this is something that is suitable for you. And I think it's just really the questioning, just someone that you can relate to in some way, where you can ask them, hey, about certain things of this industry and get an answer from that. And there definitely was moments where I did feel lonely because it was more of a this is unknown. I really don't know who to talk to. What really got me through that was just coming to a point of where I'm at now, and it's really just sticking to it and trying it. As you basically go through that journey, you meet a lot of new relationships, new mentors, or people that you can rely on, or even just ask a question. And that was what really helped me navigate through that journey was just meeting new people and actually talking to them and
Mm.
trying to just soak it up as much as I could.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to bring up because what I've learned, we'll summarize some lessons later on. We'll go through that, but a big thing that I've learned, I know right now we're saying that there's a lot of people who don't relate to us, and we are afraid to talk to them because you think that they can't understand us and they won't. But the biggest lesson is as long as you've got like a good connection with someone, good friendship, good mentor, doesn't matter if they're in your industry or not, or if they're in the same journey or not. Sometimes you can talk to them and they give you their perspective, and it actually helps you out a lot more. And it feels like you're being heard, even though they may not give a direct advice to your current problem or your current situation. And also at the same time, if it's career specifically, sometimes you can talk to people who are outside of that industry and they'll still give you good career advice or just life journey advice because exactly this I have recently resigned from my job and I didn't have anything lined up, but the longest time I've been fighting doing this because of that traditional thought of you need to have something else lined up before you quit or before you do something. And I just spoke to so many people who are not in my industry, and I'm just talking just genuinely to build connection, genuinely to have a conversation with these people. And they all had really good advice, and not just advice, just anything to help me understand my thoughts and understand what they went through that might be similar. And it was actually really helpful, and it was the best conversations that I've had just talking about this topic. And they don't have anything similar to where I am right now and my industry. So that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
Yeah, that is actually something that I relate to quite heavily. Networking and just talking to people in general. When you network and just communicate with people about certain things, just general conversation, it gives you quite a bit of guidance as to how your thoughts and feelings are at that point in time. And at times, it really helps you navigate that.
Yeah, and I think that's like the beauty of what our podcast is about too, sharing the perspectives. And even though the stories or the journeys of these particular people aren't exactly what you're looking for in your own challenges, but it really does share perspective of just the bigger picture of life in general and help you with something along your journey of life.
When we actually reflect back, though, when we look at holistically of all our experiences, is that something that we could have avoided or helped in the past if we actually think about it?
Well, from all our stories and also reflecting about all the journeys throughout my life as well, and specifically feeling lonely during growth, I think it really is just a massive mindset thing. So you only feel like you're alone because you can't speak out to someone, or you feel like someone can't relate to you. But really, are they really someone who can't relate to us, or is it just something that we're thinking and we're putting upon ourselves? So I think the biggest lesson and the biggest key takeaway is really don't think that, because it's really something that you're just projecting on yourself. So always just talk about things, talk about, just have conversations. Like if someone's like, "How are you?" I know that generally the answer is like, "Oh yeah, I'm good," or like what's been happening. You're like, "Oh yeah, things are good." But these are just very quick, short answers. But if you really go like, "Oh, I'm actually kind of struggling at the moment. I feel like this," or "This is happening in my life right now," and people are more than open to sit there and be like, "Oh, why do you feel that?" Or like, "What's been happening? Why are you feeling this way?" And that starts the conversation. So that's the biggest key lesson that I've learned is don't don't sell yourself short. Don't disregard your own emotions. And if you feel like people can't relate to you, is this something that you're just projecting on yourself, that you think that people can't relate? Or is it really that someone can't relate to you?
Yeah, this is something that mentioned earlier on. We could have handled certain situations differently. But when we actually think back about it, it's maybe if our mindset or how we approach things were a little different in our younger selves, maybe, yeah, we could have avoided these situations. And the biggest thing that when I reflect on my own personal stories, I feel like, yeah, I was a baby. I was very immature in the fact of not thinking and hiding to myself in terms of what I was truly feeling. And I think if I was very much what you said, not selling myself short, making the proactiveness or being more proactive in terms of having the conversation with people, then potentially things may have been different. When I
Yeah.
look at my nephew, he's just gone into uni, but he's so proactive in terms of how he has his communicate, like how he has your conversations with people and how he figured it out that what he's studying now is something that he wants to do. And I really do admire that because I wish I was someone that was like that back then.
Yeah, but I don't think it's, to me, it's not that I would say that it's something that we could have avoided or we could have done differently or like could have been this way. I think all of these are good experiences that we needed to have for ourselves. Like the challenges that you went through are something that you needed to go through to get to where you are today. And the challenges and the thoughts and the roadblocks that I gave myself are things that I needed to get to where I am today as well. And all of these are learning pieces, and they continue to be lessons for things that I do in the future and the things that you do in the
Yeah,
future.
of course. And I'm not disregarding that, I guess, from an alternative approach more so. If you reflect back, it could have been an alternative perspective.
But in saying that, like to me, loneliness is not a bad thing. I know that to a lot of people, it might feel like a bad thing, or it might feel like a negative sort of feeling. But to me, loneliness is has never really been a bad thing. So when we feel loneliness during growth, how can this actually be a good thing for you?
Outside of that negative connotation of being lonely, loneliness can be positive in a way of as you're transitioning, that's time for yourself to reflect, time for yourself to grow within whatever that you're trying to focus on. A transitionary period within career or a fruit, a fruit.
A fruit.
friends group,
What fruit?
an apple to a
Grapefruit.
bloody orange. Yeah. So like exactly that. It's just that alone time to really hone in and reflect and see where you are at that point in time to where you're trying to get at and how are you going to approach that.
Yeah, and I pointed this out a little earlier on when I was talking about my upbringing and the family situation. It really teaches you independence, and I can confidently say that I'm a really independent person. And because I've learnt this from such a young age, to really be by myself and be okay to be by myself, and actually sit there and just think and listen to my own thoughts. Like, not a lot of people can do that, and I didn't realize that. So, learning that at such a young age, it's actually a really good thing so that when you feel a certain way, if you're thinking a certain way, you don't just take that as what it is. So, if you're thinking to yourself that you're not doing good enough, that's not like I don't take that on board. When I have that thought, for example, that I'm like, I'm not doing good enough, I'd be like, why am I thinking that I'm not doing good enough? Like, am I really? Like, is it because I didn't put in the work? Is it because I'm comparing myself to other people? So I'm really breaking down this thought and being like, why am I not good enough? So I'm not being like, yeah, like I agree, I'm not good enough, but really thinking down what's the true meaning of this thought.
Yeah. And that's something that I realize is I lacked a lot of independence as I was younger. So maybe a lot of those thoughts or feelings that I had at that time, I just was ignoring it or I wasn't really reflecting it. So it's really just maybe if I reflected on a way where I thought, what's the purpose? What's my goal? Then maybe I would have had more clarity.
Yeah, and along with that, when you try and sit down, truly understand your thoughts, going back to that same example, thinking that you're not good enough, if you can truly accept that as well, like say you really am not where you want to be, accept that, but don't beat yourself down for it. And then when you're fully in solitude with that and fully understand that thought, then you can really be like, okay, what do I need to do to get myself to that new transition, that new growth that you want to get to? So it really clears and moves out all the noise around you that's really clouding your judgment to move forward and move to the next place that you want to be.
Yeah. And I feel the biggest thing is that it's temporary because as you're transitioning, obviously, yes, you'll be lonely. Yes, it's going to be uncharted territory, but know that it's temporary. You're only temporarily there for that moment or that period in time until you figure out your boundary. Well, not your boundaries, your
Your
bearings.
new
And
heights.
yes, your bearings and your new heights.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, temporary, because again, if you break away the meaning of growth, like growth is you're moving forward and you're the moving part, that word moving means you're actually making movement to continue forward. You're not stuck, you're not still. This is different from, so we had a episode about being plateau where you're actually trying to move forward but you're stuck in where you are. But here you're trying to move yourself forward, moving and growing to a new space. So that's why it's temporary, because you know that as you're transitioning and moving to the new space, you may feel this for a little bit, but it will go away once you continue to push forward, do the little work, be consistent. But a little bit more on decluttering, like the good thing about being lonely is doing a bit of that Maria Kondo declutter, because you might have a lot of friends at that point. Like I'm just thinking about back in uni, back in high school, I had a lot of friends and it's like big groups, kind of like what you've said in the past in other episodes. And then you start to really sit there and understand your situation. Are some of these actually people that you can keep around? Are they just friends that you want to hang out to have a good time with, or are they friends that can help push you forward or and keep you aligned to your goals? So having to think about these and decluttering and cleaning up, so like your closet, and making sure that everything is where it needs to be and still aligns with your values and your goals. It's a good time to do that. And not just friends, like friends is just an example. It's maybe your task, your things that you're doing in your day. Like, are they serving a good purpose or are they just wasting time?
Shout out to Maria Kondo. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So ultimately, I think what we should be asking ourselves is during those times of growth, what can we do? How can we approach it when there is no one that we can really lean on?
For me, I feel like you just need to continue to do things no matter what it is. Like, it doesn't have to be literally what you're doing in your career or what you need to do to get to a certain goal. So, a good example is right now, what I was saying is I quit my job, but I am freelancing. But the question is like, I don't have a group that I can lean on still that I can share my thoughts and feelings and current freelance journey on. But what I'm doing is going out networking, finding those industry networks that I can go to, meet new people, and then even spending this time off, like where I'm not working for someone, to catch up and reconnect and make new connections with old friends, new friends. And these friends aren't in the design industry, it's really just to reconnect and hang out with them, see where they are. And things will come from these, even though you don't feel like they're part of where you want to go. But just continuing to do things and doing it for yourself and what feels right and what fills your cup, essentially, you will get somewhere. Because I think no matter what you do, as long as you're taking that one step forward, it will make a big difference when you look back and you're like, oh, wow, this is how far I've come.
To talk about your example, I recall having a conversation with Eddie Shee. If you haven't checked out his episode, he was talking to me off mic about my career, and I recall he was telling me to get out, and there was a particular reason why. But that was a long story short. We haven't really spoken for a while before that. It really sparked that energy to me to really reevaluate my career at that time. And within a matter of a week or two, I basically resigned and moved on. So sometimes just maybe rekindling that relationship with someone that you used to be quite close with, friends or just people in general, just to have that conversation that really does give you that alternative perspective to what you're really going along.
Mm. And then going back into thinking about your own thoughts. So, this question is, what can we do to keep ourselves pushing forward when you feel like there's no one to lean on during times of growth? Is really sitting there and being honest with yourself. Like, why do you feel lonely? Is it because you're actually not reaching out to people? Is it because you're not actually doing anything? Was it because you're doing something but you're not talking to the right people, or you're not doing the right things for yourself? Is just being honest in that point of view and seeing what you're doing right, what you're not doing right. You just have to audit yourself and your current situation to keep yourself pushing forward.
Yeah, you got to continue to have that resilience to find alternative ways to continue.
Yeah. And when the time is right, you'll feel it. Like, you know that you're getting to where you want to be. And if you don't, then you know, like, that's still an answer. Like, if you're not getting to where you want to be, or the place where you feel like your cup is filled, that's also an answer where it's telling you that you need to do something else to steer yourself to a better direction.
Yeah. So we actually spoke quite a lot about our experiences, but when we actually look at it holistically, what have we learnt from all of our experiences?
This is something that I live by. The biggest one is either you sit there and accept your fate, that this is what's happening to you, this is me now, this is my situation, or back to what we are saying on what we can do to keep pushing forward, is just keep doing something. Keep meeting up with people, keep going out to things, keep doing the things that you love, and something will eventually come to you because you're truly working on yourself for yourself and doing the things that fills your cup, and something will come. So it's either you sit there and accept this is my life, or you do something about it.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And sometimes the whole loneliness thing is something that you potentially put on yourself, you project on yourself because you're not really looking at it from a deeper perspective.
It's sort of like the victim mentality. Like, you feel like you're alone, you feel like no one else can understand you, and no one else will understand what you feel. But is that true? Are you just projecting that on yourself?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is it's really just relying on your network, whether it's strangers, people that you just met the other day. It's really just having that conversation. The conversation really does spark up new things and an alternative perspective to things that is going on in your life. And sometimes, and for me, what I experience is it really does give you a massive projection as to what you could be looking at things at that moment.
Yeah. And another big one is things come and go. Life has its ebbs and flows, ups and downs. So you may have felt lonely before, and then say you've moved out of that transition period, you'll have another transition sometime in your life where you may feel lonely again. So for me, it's really picking up things that have happened in the past and then reflecting in like how did you feel when you came out at the end of last time you felt lonely? What did you do that helped you move out of it? What did you do that didn't work? And just picking up these little data notes and things and remembering what happened. And sometimes that will help you with a future moment when you feel lonely and you feel alone and you're growing, but no one can help you. And it will help you just do things better than what you did last time.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comments or in the DMs about if you guys have ever felt loneliness within your journey of life and if there's any alternatives that we have missed during this discussion.
Yeah. And whatever journey you're on, you're doing great.
That's right. Keep moving forward, baby.
Well, that's it for this episode, and we'll see you back in the next one.
Peace.
Bye.